This show is produced by the Hartman Media Company. For more information and links to all our great podcasts, visit hartmanmedia.com.
Welcome to the AIPIS show for accredited income property investment specialists and those who aspire to be. If you're a real estate, mortgage, or financial professional, this is the place for you. We'll explore innovative investment analysis, sales, marketing, and income-generating strategies for the most historically proven wealth creator, income property. Learn from the experts as they show you how to build a better business and a better life.
Thank you for joining us today for part 2 of the last episode.
So let me show you something. Remember I told you that I was buying 2 properties at the same time. I was buying the one property to live in Orange County, California, and I was buying the other property across the country that was my first, or maybe it was my second, because I don't know which one I actually closed on first. But I was buying one in Austin, another one further in Georgia, right? And in buying these 2 properties right around the same time I was buying this house for myself, it was a very interesting experience. So I'm going to show you, this is the tax bill for the house I was buying to move into. Okay.
Okay. Orange County.
And yeah, this is in Orange County. Now look at the magnifying glass here, and you're going to see the land value. This is according to John Morlock, the Orange County Treasurer Tax Collector, right? Because the tax collector segments the value, the 2 components, the land value and the improvement or the buildings, right? And this house altogether was $815,000. Okay, you see that right here. And the way that divided up approximately was $659,000 in land and $155,753, I guess, in improvements. Okay, that was the equation. Now, your listeners or viewers might be thinking, well, how do I know the land value versus the improvement value? There are 3 ways. Number 1, the tax collector. On every tax bill, they always divide the land and the improvement up, okay? Because it's taxed differently in probably every area of the country. You know, if it's vacant land, the tax is different than improved land. So they got to know that value, right? So they always make an estimate of what that value is. The other source is, like I said, your insurance company. Jennifer, my insurance agent, told me that that house across the country, they were giving me $135,000 in insurance. So by deduction, I knew what the land value was, okay? The third source is just have an appraisal. The appraiser will always divide those 2 components of land versus improvement. So you know what you're getting, right? Okay, so here's the way that looked. Okay, that's my house that I bought to live in. And I lived there for 7 years in this house.
Got it.
Okay. It was $815,000 total. 156, I'm rounding just a tad, 156 or 19% improvement value, and 81% or $660,000 in land value. Okay. Now, just so you know, that was a brand new house. It was built by California Pacific Homes, and they're sort of related to the biggest land developer in the country, or at least one of the biggest, the Irvine Company. Many people have heard of them. And here's what happened. Okay, I had this girlfriend at the time. Her name was Monique, and Monique's mother was in new home sales. So Monique thought she was an expert, right? We ended up breaking up, clearly. And she told me not to buy this house. Now, Monique really was vehemently trying to talk me out of buying this house. I'm glad I didn't listen to her, okay? Here's what happened. I owned this house for just 1 short year, and I couldn't believe my luck. I didn't consider this to be any great investment. I didn't consider this a stroke of genius, but it's kind of amazing what happened, okay? Because 1 year later, I saw the values climbing like crazy. And I thought, you know, I better refinance and get my money out. I always try to engage in a practice I call equity stripping, because equity stuck in a property is always at risk, number 1. And number 2, it's not working for you. I want to put that equity to work. So I call up my lender and I said, send an appraiser out. I want to do a cash out refinance, and I want to buy some more rental properties. Okay. So the appraiser came out. His name was Eric. And I'll tell you, Eric came out a year later and appraised the property again. And then Eric came to one of my conferences where I told this story about him, which was pretty funny. Okay. So here's what happened. Eric came out and said, "Congratulations, your house is now worth $1.3 million."
Wow.
And I thought, in 1 year, that house went up by $485,000. I am so lucky. Thank God. That was a great deal. Okay. But the question is, if the tax collector were to send me another tax bill, how would they have divided up the value in the LTI ratio, the land to improvement ratio? What would the tax collector have said about the new value? Where did it increase? We know that it increased by $485,000. We know that now the value is 1.3 million, but the question is, how would you allocate that value between the two primary components, land and improvement?
Did he just increase the land value, wouldn't he?
Why? Yeah, that's the puzzling thing, right? Okay, so I always ask my audience this question when I'm doing this live, and I have them vote. Raise your hand if you think it's land value. Raise your hand if you think it's improvement value. And the reality is, George, both people are right. Both things went up in value because construction costs were increasing.
Okay.
And land values were increasing. So both things went up.
Got it.
But what went up the most? Definitely land. Okay. There's no way it cost $485,000 more to build that house just 1 year later. It was an 1,800 square foot house, a nice house, but no big deal. Just it wasn't the best house I ever lived in for sure. But it was a nice 1,800 square foot brand new house, nicely designed with a nice view of the city lights and the ocean in the distance. And, it was a good house, right? It was mostly land value. So here's what happened another year later. I wanted to refinance because the rates went down. So I call up the same bank, the same lender, and they send the same guy, the same appraiser comes out. Eric, good old Eric comes out. Now, after this, during the Great Recession, they changed all this, and probably it's a very good thing they did. Now they have to use what they call appraisal management companies. So the likelihood of you ever getting the same guy twice would be extremely rare because they don't want the lender to be in cahoots with the appraiser. Good thing. Okay, that's a good thing. But in the old days, that's the way they did it, right? They just had an appraiser on staff or one that they commonly used and they'd send them out, right? So Eric gives me some bad news the following year. He says, "Hey, I'm sorry to tell you, your house is now only worth $1,235,000. It went down by $65,000. So now the question is, where did the decline come from? Land or improvement?"
Yeah, it's got to be land again, isn't it?
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. Land, you got it. Because look, the improvement value, it doesn't cost $65,000 less to build that house another year later.
Yeah, exactly. And plus with inflation, even if you have asset deflation, typically because wages are so sticky, you're still going to have the CPI go up.
Right, absolutely. And the fact is construction costs were still rising because it's interesting as a little aside. I had purchased many new homes over the years, okay, before I purchased this one. So always in California, the new home never came with a yard. You always had to hire your own landscape contractor and do your own landscaping job. So I've done many landscaping jobs. I've hired many crappy contractors. I had to sue one of them, and I had to file a complaint against another one who thankfully lost his license. He was so bad. Oh, it was awful. And so I'd done many landscaping jobs. Now, this particular landscaping job on this house, George, it shocked me how much the cost was. I couldn't believe it. Like, I could not get a decent bid. I had so many bids. I had a bunch of contractors come out, and all of them told me, it's just going to cost a lot, right? It was expensive to landscape this house. And I kept asking them, I said, why is it so expensive? I just landscaped another house about a year and a half ago. And they said, China. And I said, what? And they said, all the concrete has become very expensive because China is using it for all these infrastructure projects. They're building freeways and bridges and, skyscrapers, and the concrete just became very, very expensive. Wow. So that drove the cost up. So you're right. The decline came out of the land value. Okay. So what can we learn from this? Well, this is a long-winded thing here, right? What can we learn from this? We can learn that the risk when investing,
I can already see where this is going, and this is really cool, really, really cool.
The discovery after 19 years in the business, Jennifer caused me to discover it. I got to call her up and thank her because I never realized this before. I have followed every real estate guru. I have read a zillion books. I've been to a zillion seminars. Nobody ever taught me this. It came out of my own head.
Thought of it this way.
Okay. The risk is in high land values.
Yeah,
okay.
Right.
Now, George, because you listen to my podcast and we talked about on the show that I think there are three types of markets: linear markets, cyclical markets, and hybrid markets.
Right.
Guess what? The markets that I don't like to invest in, that I consider to be high risk markets, that I shy away from and recommend our investors, our clients, avoid, are cyclical markets. And guess what cyclical markets always have?
Yes,
they have high land values. Okay. And guess what linear markets, the markets I like, always have? They always have low land values.
Super low. And when he's saying low, guys, I know that my land value, I don't know this for sure, but back when I was investing heavily in Kansas City, when I was buying all these homes, which a lot of them I still have.
Cheap land.
Cheap. We're talking like $5,000, like $10,000 on a home that's now worth $170,000.
Yeah.
So it just shows you how that equation is so lopsided in the other direction.
It's lopsided in a very good way for the investor. So this on the screen now is a very childish looking, poorly graphically designed. I really need a better graphic designer, clearly. Okay. So don't make fun of me. I was going to do this on a whiteboard. It would have been worse than this. Okay. Was the value of the house I moved into, the story I just told you. That's how it looked. Mostly land value, very little improvement value. Okay. The house, the rental property I was buying across the country looked more like this.
Right.
Very low land value and high improvement value. Let's go back to Jennifer, the insurance agent. She calls me up and she says, Jason, we're going to give you $135,000 insurance on this house. Well, what I didn't tell you yet is what I paid for that house. The price of that house, I will now tell you, was $159,000. So I knew by deduction that the land value was $24,000 and the improvement value was $135,000. Here's the thing, okay? Ultimately, that house I moved into, I sold it for a lot less than $1,235,000 because I stayed in Orange County. The Great Recession happened, and guess what? Land values plummeted. I ended up selling that house for, I think I sold it for $917,000, just a little bit over $100,000 over what I paid for it 7 years earlier. Okay.
Yeah, you got to include the property taxes and the maintenance.
Yeah. Oh, hey, my overall bill on that house for HOA, property tax, mortgage, remember mortgage rates were much higher back then, was $11,000 a month. That's what I was paying to live there. Okay. Yeah. So, California, outrageous, right? So here's the thing. If the land value drops by half, let's estimate the land value, though, at the peak of the market on the house I lived in. It was $1.3 million. Remember, the original improvement cost was $155,000. okay, or 156, rounding correctly. So let's say that the improvement is now worth, the house is now worth 200,000 because it costs more to build it. The construction costs, labor costs have gone up.
Right.
It's worth 200,000. That means the land is worth 1.1 million. Okay. If that land goes down by 50%, I'm going to lose $550,000.
Yeah.
But on the house, the rental property across the country where the land value is only $24,000, I'm only going to lose $12,000.
Right.
And I can live with that. Plus, there's another huge thing. When I sold the house I lived in, before selling it, I also put it up for rent. And I was asking $4,500 a month in rent. Yet my payment was $11,000. Not a very good deal at all, right? But, if you think it's going to go up in value again or something like that, you can rationalize it away, but not a good rationalization. So I'm glad I sold it, okay? But the house, the cheap house that was $159,000, that's a sustainable property, okay? I can rent that and afford to keep it, where the expensive house, I can't rent it and afford to keep it.
Right. Because one cash flow positive, one cash flow negative.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So low land value equals low risk. High land value equals high risk. That's the moral of the story, period. This is true everywhere on planet Earth, that you have a cyclical market where you always have high land values. Dubai, Paris, Tokyo, London, Hong Kong, New York, LA, San Francisco, Seattle, Miami, it doesn't matter. You can name any city on the planet Earth, and I will tell you if it has high land values, it is definitely a cyclical market. And I will also tell you if it is a cyclical market, it also has high land values. There's no exception. Those are always true together anywhere on Earth. And I will tell you that if it is a cyclical market, your rent to value or RV ratio is going to be terrible. And I'll tell you a contemporary story quickly about that. One of my contractors, a guy named Charles, he's a great guy, and he's been doing some good work for us. He lives in Seattle, and he tells me just 3 days ago, he says, "Hey, we bought a new house. We're moving." And I said, "Oh, congratulations." And, we got into the conversation, "What are you doing with your current house?" And he says, "Well, we're going to rent it." And I said, "How much is it worth?"
Yeah, and it's in Seattle?
In Seattle, yeah. Well, Seattle metro area, not exactly Seattle, but metro area, metro Seattle. And I said, "How much is it worth?" He only had to tell me one number, and I've done this many times, George. I only need one number, and I can tell you the other number because the ratio is always the same. He says it's worth $400,000. And I said, "Oh, so you're going to rent it for $2,200, huh?"
Yeah, I was going to say.
And he says, "Well, $2,300.
Yeah.
I'm pretty close with only knowing one of the numbers, right? And because that ratio holds up all around the world. The only time it ever changes is when there's some funny government intervention with rent control or something, okay? Mm-hmm. But otherwise, that RV ratio is always the same in every cyclical market, and it's always the same in every linear market. And in the hybrid markets, it'll be somewhere in the middle of the two.
And not only is his RV ratio horrible, but if he has leverage on that, then he's going to be cash flow negative.
Yeah.
And to your earlier point with the land value, if he's got a $400,000 house in Seattle, the land value is going to be, let's say, 75%. So he's got so much more risk than by taking that house, taking out the equity, going into a linear market, and let's say two $200,000 homes, or maybe not even that.
No. What I told him is, I said, "Look, Charles, through our network, I mean, look, he works for us. He knows what we do. He's been to our conferences. He listens to the podcast.
He should know better than that. Then what's he doing?"
People get a little funny when it's their own. He's a logical guy. He wants to buy rental properties too, but he already owns this one. And the view is like a bird in the hand. So I'll tell you the rationalization, okay? I said, "Look, you can sell that house, and you can buy 4 $100,000 houses, and you can be diversified into, maybe 2 different markets, 2 houses in each of them, okay? And you'll get somewhere in the neighborhood of $4,000 a month. Why would you want just $2,200 or $2,300 a month when you can get $4,000 a month? And he says, well, our loan balance is pretty low, so we're actually going to have positive cash flow. And I said, yeah, but then you're going to have a bunch of equity not working for you. And he gets it, but it's
and the land value. And if you did what you said, where you took that 400 and bought 4 houses with it, the land value would go from being 75% of the cost to call it 10%.
Yeah, maybe 20%. Those Kansas City houses you mentioned, those lot values are probably 20 grand now. They're probably not 5,000 anymore.
Yeah. But the bottom line is it would be far, far lower. So he'd be getting more cash flow, right, and he'd be reducing his downside. You know why I think people, or how the majority of people rationalize it, at least the people that I talk to, is they won't admit it. They won't admit it, but deep down, they're like, I don't want to sell it because it could double in price over the next 3 or 4 years. It's the gambling component. Right. They've seen it go up. It's recency bias, where they're like, oh man, but in the back of their mind, they're thinking, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, this house was only worth 200 and it doubled in price. And if I sell it and go into those linear markets that Jason's talking about, I'm not going to have the opportunity to double my money. And your mind starts playing tricks on you. You got the devil on this side and the angel on this side. And the devil keeps whispering in your ear that you got to keep that, because you could get another home run on this equity, and then you could be rich. And man, if you get 800,000 out of this house, think about what you could do with that. And then they don't say that. Yeah, but that's the underlying.
We all, I'm so glad you mentioned recency bias, George, because we should all look up human biases, right? Or is that how you say it? Anyway, we all have these biases. The other bias that's probably influencing him is what's called sunk cost bias, right? Mm-hmm. So he's lived there. He's spent money on that house. He's taken pride in that house. So is his wife. And, they have like a sunk cost in it, right? And then there's this bird in the hand worth 2 in the bush, certainty bias, right? So there's all these different things, right? So I don't fault him for it. A lot of, millions of people have that same bias. Okay, it's just part of human nature. But it's really interesting. The point is, get the equity out of your property. The property will perform. It'll go up in value by the same amount, or down in value by the same amount, regardless of how much equity you have in it. You will get the same amount of income, regardless of how much equity. Have you ever had a tenant come to you and say, hey, what is your loan balance and what is your mortgage payment? I want to make sure I cover that for you. They never say that. Or if it's a low loan balance and a low mortgage payment, they say, hey, give me a better deal. They will say that, okay? But the property will perform the same regardless of the amount of equity in the property. Get the equity out of the property, okay? It's just not a good place to keep equity. And I've talked a lot about that on the podcast. We won't. That's a whole nother topic, really. But the point is, low land value equals low risk. High land value equals high risk. And that's the Hartman Risk Evaluator in a nutshell.
That was really cool. I have never... I've kind of come to that conclusion in a roundabout way, but never through that type of analysis. Yeah. That is really, really neat.
Yeah. It took me 19 years to figure that out. And it was all because of that call from Jennifer and that aha moment, that epiphany. It was really interesting. Yeah. Good
all
stuff.
All right, Jason. Well, just to let everyone know that I'm super stoked, because this episode of the Rebel Capitalist Show is probably airing on Sunday morning. So I want to let everyone know that Jason will actually be joining us tonight on the live stream.
Yes, that's going to be fun.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. So if you got questions that you want to ask Jason directly, make sure you write those down. Join us on the live stream tonight. It's going to be 7 p.m. Eastern time, and Jason can answer all those questions for you. It's going to be absolutely awesome. And let everyone know, Jason's going to be with us probably once a month or a couple times a month, once a month on the live stream, at least once a month on the Rebel Capitalist Show, to continue to educate you on real estate investing and really help you out and help you make wise investments in an economic situation that we're in right now, where it's very precarious.
Yep,
to say the least.
Yeah, it is an uncertain time for sure, George, and I appreciate you having me on, and it's been just great to talk about this with you, and so happy investing to you and your listeners, and hey, we'll talk to you tonight on the live stream.
For sure. And Jason, let everyone know that if they do have more questions or they want to contact you, how should they go about that?
Yeah. The best thing is my website is jasonhartman.com, just jasonhartman.com. And then my podcast, The Creating Wealth Show, you can find on any podcast platform. And I'm happy to say that George Gammon has been a guest on my show. And that was an excellent episode you did with me recently. So check it out, The Creating Wealth Show. Just type Jason Hartman on any podcast platform, iTunes, Stitcher Radio, whatever you use.
All right, Jason. Well, I'll talk to you here in a couple hours on the live stream.
Sounds good. Happy investing.
For more of Jason Hartman's content, check out jasonhartman.com or The Creating Wealth Show, the podcast I would highly suggest.
Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Be sure to check out the show's specific website and our general website, hartmanmedia.com, for appropriate disclaimers and terms of service. Remember that guest opinions are their own, and if you require specific legal or tax advice or advice in any other specialized area, please consult an appropriate professional. And we also very much appreciate you reviewing the show. Please go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio or whatever platform you're using and write a review for the show. We would very much appreciate that. And be sure to make it official and subscribe so you do not miss any episodes. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.